see on the official developer website, we have an explanation of what is intent. Intent is a messaging object you can use to request action from another component. Although intent facilitates communication between components in several ways, there are three fundamental use cases. So basically, the intents can be used for activities and starting a service and delivering a broadcast. And as you can see, there are two types of intents, and one is explicit, other is implicit. Explicit intent is basically used to call inside components of the application. You'll typically use an explicit intent to start a component in your own app. Okay. And implicit intent do not name specific component, but instead declare a general action which is to be performed. A component from another app to handle it. Like calling a URL is a basic example of intent. So we'll just see what are the different types of intents and how they work. So let's create a basic Android Studio project and let's see how they work. Let's create a basic project and with empty activity, and let's name it as Android intent. We are finishing it. Okay. So as the project is loading, so basically in most cases intent is used for calling services, broadcast receivers and activities. In my videos I have already showed how to call service from how to start a service from intent and how to receive and register a broadcast receiver using intent. So as you can see, the project is being created. We will create in this project, we will create basically two activities. One is already created and the other one will be called using an intent. And we will have one example of implicit intent through which we will call another component outside the application. So basically we will be calling a URL which will open in another browser, which is other Android application. So the Gradle is being built. So the Gradle is finished, as you can see. So let's first create one more activity which will be used for explicit intent. We will create one empty activity named as activity 2. Okay, so the activity 2 is also created. Now activity 2 has been created, and we will just go and add one text here which will show that this is activity 2. So we will just add one text view. So as you can see, it is already added into the constraint layout, so we have to define the constraints, and we'll just add this to the center of the application, center of the activity. So let's change the text to activity 2, so we will be able to identify the activity. And now let's come to the intents. First we will create two functions which will be called on different using different buttons, and for that we need two buttons on activity main.xml file. So this is already, as you can see, the hello world text is there. We will delete it. Okay, and just for a better view we will. Okay, so let's add two different buttons. Okay, as you can see, the two different buttons have been created, and we will just rename these buttons as Implicit Intent and Explicit Intent, and button IMP EXP. I have changed the IDs of these buttons, and let's bind the IDs into the Java. Okay, button IMP and EXP. Okay, and here IMP equal to find view by ID r.id.imp. We'll just copy paste this one and change the name exp, and we will set a click listener on this. So for that we have to implement on click listener, and as you can see the red line, this is to show that you have to implement the methods which is on click. Okay, now we will add click listener on both the buttons. Okay, so the listener has been registered, and we have to create two functions. First will be implicit one, implicit intent. For calling the implicit function, the second one will be explicit intent, to call the explicit intent. So now we will create one intent object here. Intent is equal to new intent. We'll set the action for intent. Set action. So what is set action? Set action function is basically used to define the action which will be performed by the intent. So here we are going to we are going to call one URL. So according to that we will set an action. There are multiple actions intent dot action view. We want to view the URL, so we will set an action as view, and intent dot set data. So what is set data? Data is which we are going to pass into the intent. So we want to open a URL, so we will just pass the URL. Let's copy it from here. Suppose let's open google.com. So we'll copy the URL from here, https, and to start or call the intent, we use function named as start activity, not activities, activity. So we will pass the intent object in here and we are done. We will so this is done for implicit intent. We will do the same for explicit intent. Explicit intent, and we will just remove this and we will do something else here. Get base context is the current context of the activity, and the second one will be activity 2 dot class. This is the name of the activity that we are going to call. So this is done for explicit intent. We will call another activity, and this is implicit intent. We will call a URL. So we'll create switch case here, v.getID, r.id.imp. We will add that function here, implicit intent, and the second case will be r.id.exp break, and this will be explicit intent. Okay, so as you see, we are done coding, and now we will going to run this project and let's see what happens. As you can see, the Gradle build is running, and we already have our emulator ready to save some time. As you can see, the install has been finished. So we will click the explicit intent and let's see what happens. So as you can see, the activity 2 has been called using explicit intent. Let's press the back button and let's call implicit intent. It should call the URL which we have entered. So as you can see, it has called the URL outside the application. So this is the example of implicit intent. So in today's video, as you have learned how to use intents, what are intents, and different types of intents. So we have learned one example of both the intents. So thank you, and please subscribe to the channel.